Hi everyone, hope you're well. I've got Hannah Parkin from Sherborne Girls with me today. We're just going to spend a bit of time reflecting on the conference last week, just for people that weren't there, but also as a reminder to people that were. So, first of all, Hannah, thanks very much for joining us. Maybe just give us a few of your takeaways from the conference.
Yeah, I think the first day kicked off really well with the forum. I think it was really good to get everybody in one place, kind of discussing the current issues around the challenges we're facing in school sport at the moment. Some really interesting conversations around transport, match tees, the financial climate. I guess, how do we adapt to the financial climate and still get the best out of our departments and schools? Um, it was also really good to get together as like the kind of a girls' school specialist and the co-ed kind of separated off. And I was really fortunate that I was part of that group who spoke about girls' school provision. And I was really pleased to have the opportunity to talk about Sherborne Girls and the female focused approach at Sherborne Girls. That was really amazing. Um, and then as we move on through as the days kind of went on, particularly enjoyed the talk from Sue Woodruff on the challenges for school sport in the financial climate. Lots of key takeaways, but mostly around the co-curricular program and how it needs to thrive and not just survive. I thought that was really interesting, particularly around kind of the whole school strategic plan and how does the sports department feed into that, and the kind of the value of the director of sport as a super headed department. I thought was really interesting, and also recognised the kind of the variety within the job and how different it is from other heads of department. Other things, James Kerr's talk, kind of following on from last year's legacy, there was some really interesting bits about ethos and culture, and probably the key takeaway for lots of us was his conversation around we make the weather and what environment we create and what climate we bring. A lot around self-regulating yourself before you're then able to create an environment for others. And I think, Chris, we discussed actually that was such a good takeaway.
Yeah.
So yeah, some really good bits in there. Lots about high performance female athletes from Loughborough. Some really good university links this year, I thought. Interesting talk from Fion um, about kind of the relationship between physical education in universities and kind of the research that's taking place right now. Want to give a little spotlight to Tess Howard because her work on
Yeah.
the Inclusive Sportswear Charter. Not many of us were in that room, which was a real shame because she deserved a real spotlight.
Yeah.
The work she's doing around the pledge with different schools and with different organisations to kind of make sure that off the back of her movement with England hockey and the switch from compulsory sports to shorts and sports at international level, it led to some really interesting conversations around what we're doing at school level. And she had so much to say, and the fact that her inclusive sportswear charter was just launched was a really good platform for her to kind of showcase that lots of schools can take the pledge, sign up, do the modules, and then hopefully make some changes in education to try and adopt that similar approach. And we talked about, the idea of a netball dress. Does it have to be a dress? Can it be a top and shorts? Can
Yeah.
we offer girls options that would still look smart, but would still cater to the needs of every girl so they don't feel like they're uncomfortable?
Yeah. No, I
So there
agree.
was lots of key takeaways, and then probably the most valuable thing of all, the connections with other directors of sport across the UK.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I enjoyed so much of that, and I think I said to you earlier, the dinner for me, in previous years we finished the dinner and everyone vacated to the bar pretty quickly, and I think I took a photo an hour after the dinner had finished. Everyone was just caught in conversation, making connections, and I think that's what directors of sport, are really good at. And again, I'd echo. I think it was a shame that more people weren't at Tess's talk. What she's doing is truly inspirational. I think the more of us that can get on the on their to pledge to their charter would be good. And also another heads up, I thought Cat Jones and Podium, which is another not-for-profit who is doing all this fantastic work around, youth sport that we can all access for free. So if people weren't at Tess's talk or at Cat Jones's podium talk, I'd definitely look those up. And as you said as well, Hannah, I think university links is something that directors of sport are looking at. I know both Fionn at Leeds Beckett and Ash Casey at Loughborough are keen to develop links. So I think that's a really important element as well. What sort of conversations were you having with other directors of sport, Hannah, then over the last couple of days? What do you think are the key topics around at the moment?
I mean, probably most obvious is financial. You know, what are we going to do to try and make savings, or actually instead, can you guarantee the value of what you're spending the money on? So, are you just spending it because that's what you've always spent it on? You
Yeah,
know, can you look at it more creatively? Can you maybe look at it in a more direct way and think, actually, how can I make savings that are going to get better outcomes for my pupils? So, I guess just that review of like, actually, is your money going to the places it needs to go to while still being able to drive provision and improve it that next stage, even if we are facing sector cuts, that's
yeah,
inevitable. That was definitely a key topic. Also a lot around for me, because I was in lots of the kind of girls' school circles, it was a lot around the move away from a sport for life, but or sport for all, to a move for kind of sport for life. So while we can't, it's not always feasible to do a sport for all model because something's going to have to give. I mean, we all would like to say that we're getting performance and participation and we're catering for both, which lots of schools do their very best to do that. But I thought it was really interesting to have this conversation around, okay, we might not be able to do sport for all without something being compromised, but we can definitely do healthy, active lifestyles.
agreed.
So
Yeah,
that was a really interesting kind of
yeah,
diversion away from actually performance participation, but actually healthy, active lifestyles and trying to recognize and get reward for that,
yeah.
just as much as playing for a team or a house.
I think I heard someone say, at the conference, we should be encouraging exercise for life, and that's the thing, isn't it? I know Neil always says we can argue whether we should be playing netball, hockey, or rugby, but no one's going to argue that when our children leave school, they should be able to live healthy, active lifestyles. And I agree with you. I think and with Fion's work as well in physical literacy, that's becoming more and more. More and more to the fore. What about obviously this is the first PADSIS conference that we had more female speakers than male speakers, and some brilliant ones. We're talking about Sally Needham at the minute, but as a female director of sport, how do you think that has grown over the last few years, and obviously how do you think we can improve it over the next couple of years? Because that's what we would like to do.
I think it's all strides in the right direction, and it's definitely moving away from kind of entering a room where you feel like you are the only female voice. But again, that's not necessarily the fault of the conference. It's just the national picture that is,
Yeah,
it is a lot of men in director of sport roles, and it's especially rare to have women in co-education or all boys settings in this position. It's more common that you would have a female director of sport in an all-girls school.
yeah,
But it's so positive and encouraging that we had more people on display this year who were female,
yeah,
who were kind of, I guess, explaining it from that point of view, which is unfortunately, just still, there is still a difference. And for whatever reason it may be, there are a lot less women in these roles.
mm,
Or instead they're second in department as head of girls' games.
yeah,
So definitely the move to more speakers was really positive. I think having such a strong head from the
yeah,
GSAL coming in,
yeah,
that was really impressive to hear kind of her story and her value of just starting off as a teacher to where she is now. I
yeah,
think she said ultimately I'm just an English teacher and I've
yeah,
moved up. I thought that was really, really encouraging, particularly because presumably she would have gone away and had a family and come back to it. And
yeah,
that's kind of where she's ended up in such a prestigious role. I also think Sarah Rowling's models that so incredibly well,
yeah,
as someone that's head of the GSA Sport and Wellness Committee, but also head at Heathfield. It's just really impressive to have the spotlight given to these women and
yeah,
Tess Howard as well,
yeah,
who are game changers in their respective fields and who are doing so much to try and change the narrative and
yeah.
I guess just I guess give more recognition to women
Yeah.
in this environment. So I would definitely say things are moving in the right direction. We're not there yet.
Agreed.
I would still love to see more women at the
Yeah.
conference. But equally, that's not necessarily a PADSIS issue.
Yeah.
It's probably a sector-wide.
Yeah, we're trying. I think you're right. I think we all reflected afterwards, well, wouldn't it be great if Sue was our head? She was fantastic, wasn't she? The way, she spoke and, the fact that she thinks it's so important, director of sport, she actually line manages Lorcan, her director of sport, and puts her director of sport on the senior management team. But she spoke so well. And, to have someone of her quality who is and has been the chair of HMC, I thought was fantastic. The other one I really wanted to talk about was Dr. Sally Needham as well. I think that was one that everyone was sort of on the edge of their seats when she was speaking. What did you learn from Sally, and what would you maybe take back to your department?
I thought what she said a lot that was very interesting around the psychology behind kind of how we work and how we function. And she talked about kind of, I guess, the neuroscience behind your brain and why we respond in that way. And I think it was just really important to kind of, I guess, recognize that some of it is just our innate responses. And
Yeah,
often, we read into those and actually it's not always our fault as such. It's
yeah,
more the fact that that's kind of our innate responses, and it's like fight or flight, and it's actually those innate responses that we're not really fully aware of. And I think it again comes back to that self-regulation of how
yeah,
do I regulate that response so
yeah,
that
yeah,
um, I can get the best out of that child. So I think she referred to an example where she said she used to have a coaching session with a really difficult girl who was presenting really challenging behaviors. And she said she instead, rather than put the blame on her and say, this girl's got loads of problems and these are her issues, she instead reflected inwardly and thought, how could I handle this differently? And I suppose it links back to that original point of, you dictate the climate and you
yeah.
dictate the weather and you can control your response. So you need to do more with it.
Yeah, and I think from my point of view, when I do my weekly school visits, I see a lot of directors of sport, under pressure, and some of the techniques that Sally was talking, I think really can help us if we could just put some breath work into a day or get outside or, whether it's meditation or cold showers or whatever works for you. But, there were examples she gave where we can, as you said, regulate ourselves, because if we're a better regulated human, we're going to be able to deal with our department and others. And I thought that was a very, strong bit of advice there from Sally. So just to finish off, Hannah, then what would be on the wish list for next year for PADSIS? If we start planning, what would you like to see at the conference next year?
Well, I think it's definitely evolved. So I think in terms of the topics covered, they're growing every year, and I think they're always really relevant. And there's a case to argue to want to go to every one of the talks that you offer.
Yeah,
Um, I think possibly maybe more women in leadership. I would love to see. So
yeah,
maybe not even in a school setting, maybe in a performance setting,
yeah,
but definitely women's experience in leadership. I would find that really inspiring. To kind of give the spotlight to somebody that's been in a leadership capacity. Um, Off the top of my head, I'm thinking of Lucy who was Director of Education at the FA,
yeah,
Lucy Pearson.
yeah,
Um, but she's just one example of somebody that
yeah,
has been in a male-dominated environment, but
yeah.
has made enormous impact as a leader.
Agreed. She's very impressive. And also just, heads up to everyone not to forget we've got our Women in Sport conference in June at Loughborough, where we're hoping to do that, bring some, women in high performance environments and leadership positions so we can all learn from them as well. Hannah, thanks so much for your time today. Really, really appreciate it. Good to see you as always. And I'll see you in a couple of weeks' time as well.
Thanks so much. Thanks. Bye.